You probably think that as long as you have a car and Google Maps, you can drive across all 50 states and turn wherever you want in the so-called land of the free. Unfortunately, that road trip will never be complete. Even on that familiar map, there are still zones that have been quietly crossed out. Toxic islands sealed off by pollution, nerve gas testing grounds, doomsday bunkers buried under mountains, and ghost towns abandoned because they're simply too poisonous for humans to live in. These are the 10 creepiest and most mysterious places in America that you almost never get to visit, unless you're crazy enough to step past the no trespassing U.S. government property signs. And we'll start with a quiet corner of the desert. A place where the sunrise once looked like a postcard, but history remembers it as the very starting point of the nuclear age. Number 10. Trinity Site, New Mexico. Picture a flat stretch of New Mexico desert before sunrise. For a moment, it looks like any other morning in the Southwest. You could almost believe this place is gentle, that it has always been quiet and always will be. That feeling lasted right up until 5:29 in the morning on July 16, 1945. In one flash, that soft blue sky turned white, then green, then something no human eye had ever seen before. The first nuclear test in history happened here at a spot the government named Trinity Site. People many miles away saw the light and thought the world had ended. The strange part is that even the scientists were not fully sure what they were about to do. In the months before the test, people in the Manhattan Project argued over a question that sounds like a bad joke at a bar. If we light this device, is there any chance it ignites the air itself? Officially, the answer came back no. Unofficially, a few of them still looked at that tower on test morning and wondered if they were about to roll dice with the sky above New Mexico. When the bomb went off, it did more than leave a crater. The sand beneath the tower melted into a green glass the locals later called Trinitite, sharp and glittering and just radioactive enough to remind you this was not a fireworks show. Fallout drifted over ranches and tiny communities, the people who lived there later called downwinders. For decades, they watched neighbors get sick while the official story said everything was safe enough. That was the real horror here. Not the flash, but the way the story stayed quiet. Today, Trinity Site sits inside White Sands Missile Range, behind fences, warning signs, and a modest stone monument. Most days, you cannot get anywhere near it. On paper, there is an open day once a year when regular people can visit, but even that can disappear under a budget fight or a government shutdown. And if a place that literally rewired human history can be locked away that easily, wait until you see what happens when an entire town is declared too toxic to live in at all. Number 9. Gilman, Colorado. Gilman sits on a cliff above the Eagle River in Colorado, close to Highway 24 and the little town of Minturn. From the road, it looks like any other forgotten mountain settlement until you hear why it was abandoned. For more than 100 years, this place existed for a single purpose. The mine cut into the rock behind the houses, pulled lead, zinc, silver, and copper out of the mountain, and sent all that value somewhere else in America. The town itself was an afterthought, a balcony bolted to the slope so workers had somewhere to sleep between shifts. That is the comforting version of the story. The real version starts in the ground and in the river. Every mine leaves something behind. In Gilman, the waste rock and tailings sat in huge piles while water seeped through them, slowly turning into an acidic soup. That water did not stay on the hill. It drained into the Eagle River, the same river that carries anglers, rafters, and drinking water farther down the valley. By the early 1980s, tests showed metals and acidity at levels that no one could pretend were harmless anymore. This is where the Environmental Protection Agency walked in and said what no town ever wants to hear. The mine is not just unprofitable, it is a threat. Gilman was pulled into the federal Superfund program and inspectors counted roughly 8 million tons of mine waste that had to be contained. Once that label went on the map, the future was gone. The mine closed, workers were told to leave, and the town emptied out so quickly it felt less like a slow decline and more like an evacuation order. One season there are families on the hill. The next season there are padlocked doors and curtains still hanging in windows with no one behind them. Today, Gilman looks like the perfect set for a horror film about a poisoned town. Rows of empty houses lean over the valley, windows smashed, graffiti crawling across bedroom walls, snow drifting into rooms where no one has slept for decades. Old machinery rusts in place. A small cemetery clings to the slope as if the dead are the only residents allowed to stay. For urban explorers, this sounds like a dream location, a place you could slip into for just one quick look. That is where reality steps in. Gilman is private property inside an active federal cleanup. The county has made it clear there is no tolerance for trespassers. There are hidden shafts, rotten floors, trapped gases, and chemical leftovers that do not care how many views your video might get. Step across the line and you are walking into a hazard zone with a court date attached. That is what happens when pollution kills a town. Number 9 is a ghost pinned to a mountain. Number 8 is what it looks like when disease does the same thing to a tiny island, almost within sight of New York City. Number 8, North Brother Island, New York. North Brother Island sits in the East River between the Bronx and Rikers Island, technically inside New York City, but feeling like it is slipped out of time. Yet right in the middle of that noise is a small patch of land that does not just sleep, it feels sedated. Only the carcass of a hospital complex, roofs caving in, hallways rotting, windows missing, while trees and birds quietly take it back. For most people, this island might as well not exist, but for Manhattan in the 19th and early 20th century, it was the place where the city sent the problems it did not want to see. Riverside Hospital moved out here to isolate outbreaks. Typhoid, smallpox, tuberculosis, polio, the scary words from old medical charts. If you were unlucky enough to catch the wrong disease or unlucky enough to be accused of spreading it, this was where you could disappear for months or years. The most famous inmate never broke a law in the usual sense. Mary Mallon, better known as Typhoid Mary, worked as a cook who carried the bacteria without getting sick herself. Once the authorities decided she was a danger, they brought her to North Brother Island and kept her here for the last 26 years of her life. No trial, no dramatic escape, just a long, slow quiet on an island that did not forgive. And that is only the epidemic chapter. On a summer day in 1904, the excursion boat General Slocum caught fire on the East River and drifted toward the island while burning. More than 1,000 people died in that disaster, many of them women and children from a church outing. The water around North Brother filled with bodies and debris. Staff from the hospital tried to pull survivors from the river, but the shoreline became a kind of open-air morgue for days. When you look at maps of New York, you do not see that layer. You just see another green shape in the water and assume it is nothing. Today, the island is even quieter than it was during its worst days. Ivy and young trees burst through floorboards, peel paint from the walls, and wrap around stair rails. Classroom chairs sit in place under collapsed ceilings. Medical records molder in damp rooms that no one has cleaned out. It looks like a ready-made set for a movie about the end of the world, which is exactly why curious people want to get in, and city officials are very firm that they will not. New York City Parks keeps the gates locked. No public access, no secret boat tour, no casual paddleboard landing. The only way onto North Brother Island is as a researcher or official, escorted and watched. And even then, you do not stay long. Once this place locked away the sick for the safety of the city. Now it locks away the memory of how the city treated them. And if an abandoned plague island in the middle of New York is not creepy enough, wait until you hear about an entire island where the owners decide who is allowed to exist there in the first place. Number 7. Niʻihau, Hawaii. Niʻihau sits just off the west coast of Kauai, a small private island floating in that bright Pacific blue that every Hawaii commercial loves. There is just one detail missing. No tourists, no resorts, no road you can drive along with a rental car. Unless the family that owns this island invites you, you stay on the map side of the story, not the real one. The Robinson family has controlled Niʻihau since the 1860s, running it more like a tiny kingdom than a modern neighborhood. For generations, they have set rules that sound almost unreal to people on the mainland. No internet, almost no outsiders, strict bans on certain habits and outside influences, a heavy focus on keeping the Hawaiian language, and a very specific way of life inside the fence. If you are born there, this is simply home. If you are not, you hear about it in rumors and short news pieces and never quite get a clear picture of what daily life is like. That uncertainty is part of the island's gravity. You know people live there, but you never see them. Then there is the story that tore through Niʻihau in 1941. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, a Japanese pilot crash-landed on the island, expecting it to be empty. Instead, he ran straight into a closed community that suddenly had to decide what loyalty meant and who they trusted. Some residents tried to help him, others tried to stop him, and the situation turned violent before it ended. The Niʻihau incident became a small note in the history of the war, but on a place as small and sealed off as this, that kind of event sinks deep into the ground. It shows how fast a quiet paradise can tighten like a fist when the outside world literally falls from the sky. Today, fewer than 200 people are believed to live on Niʻihau. Some work with cattle and fields, some work for a military radar installation that quietly watches the horizon. On paper, it is simply a private island with strict rules. In practice, it is one of the most controlled pieces of land in the United States. You can fly over on a sightseeing helicopter or pay for a guided hunting trip along the outer shore, then go home and brag that you saw the Forbidden Island. What you will not do is walk its main paths, sit in its living rooms, or listen in on its church meetings and family arguments. The public face is an empty beach and a pretty name. The real life of the island stays behind a carefully maintained wall of silence. Niʻihau is what happens when humans decide who is allowed to get in. Number 6 is what happens when nature and the Pentagon work together to make sure no one gets in at all. Number 6. Johnston Atoll, Pacific. Johnston Atoll lies in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, far from any city, just a small ring of sand and coral on the map. But this little circle of sand did become a spa. It became something much darker. For many years, Johnston Atoll was a launch pad and a storage room for weapons that most people only hear about in history class. In the 1960s, the United States used this place to launch nuclear missiles into the upper atmosphere. On paper, the tests were neat and scientific. In reality, some of the launches failed. When a missile breaks apart over a small atoll, the pieces do not vanish. Plutonium and other dangerous material fall back onto the land and into the lagoon. Imagine standing on that beach and knowing the soil under your feet was once part of an accident report with the word classified stamped on it. The silence starts to feel different. Then came the chemical chapter. After the nuclear test, ships began to bring other cargo to Johnston Atoll. Tanks of nerve agent, drums of blister agent, containers of Agent Orange from the Vietnam era. All of it sent to this isolated dot so it could be burned, neutralized, or buried at special facilities on the island. Engineers tried to keep everything under control, but the environmental reports from those years read like a list of things you never want near your food or your water. In a way, the atoll became a case study for what happens when a modern army uses a small island as a trash can for its most toxic leftovers. Today, the pictures look softer. Johnston Atoll is now labeled a National Wildlife Refuge. Seabirds nest in the sand. Turtles crawl up the beach to lay their eggs. Grass and low shrubs hide some of the old scars. If you only read the name, it sounds like a nature lover's dream. But the signs tell another story. The island is closed to public entry. There are no tourist boats, no diving trips, no curious sailors allowed to stop and explore. The only people who land here are staff from the Air Force or the Fish and Wildlife Service with strict paperwork and a reason to be there. Nature is invited back, humans are not. It feels like a place that was not only abandoned, but abandoned on purpose, as if everyone quietly agreed not to think about what it once held. That is the ocean chapter of America's Forbidden Zones. Next, we go back to the mainland to a place where even the sheep did not make it out alive. Number 5. Dugway Proving, Utah. Dugway Proving Ground sits out in the Utah desert, a huge block of land that most people will only ever see as a blank space on the map. But that is just the view from the outside. On the inside, behind the checkpoints and the fences, this is where the United States Army has spent decades testing things that are designed to keep people alive around chemical and biological weapons, and also testing some of those weapons themselves. People online jokingly call it Area 52, and that nickname does not come from nowhere. Dugway was built to answer ugly questions. What happens to equipment when you spray nerve agents in the air? How long do germs survive in desert wind? Can protective suits and gas masks really handle the worst case? The official language talks about defense and readiness. The unofficial stories are the ones that stick. The most famous one starts in Skull Valley, just north of Dugway, in the winter of 1968. It was ranch country, quiet fields, sheep on the hillsides. Then, over a span of a few days, more than 6,000 of those sheep died. Some were found lying as if they had simply stopped in place. Others went blind or collapsed in groups. Locals did not need a scientist to tell them something was wrong. They were used to wind, dust, and regular farm problems. They were not used to thousands of animals dying almost at once. The timing lined up with tests at Dugway involving VX, a nerve agent so strong that a tiny drop on bare skin can kill a person. For years, the government carefully argued and reworded its reports. Lines like partial responsibility started to appear. To this day, people in the area still use the phrase sheep kill as a sort of shorthand warning when they talk about the range next door. It is the story that makes the whole place feel less like a training area and more like a giant experiment that got out into the valley. Right now, Dugway is still active. The mission list has changed over time, but the basic rule for the public has not. The Army describes it as a closed post. If you want to get in, you need a sponsor on the inside, a background check, and a stack of paperwork. For regular people, Dugway is just a long fence, a guarded gate, and a series of warning signs. Beyond that fence, you cannot see what they test or how. So people fill the silence with guesses. Some imagine new drones. Some imagine designer viruses. Some just shrug and say, it is where they hide the aliens that did not fit in Area 51. The official answer stays short. Training. That is all. Experiment ranges are creepy enough, but what about the places built not to test weapons but to survive them? Number 4. Cheyenne Mountain Complex, Colorado. Cheyenne Mountain sits just outside Colorado Springs in Colorado. People go there to hike, to look at the red rocks, to take family pictures with the mountain in the background. On the surface, it feels like any other scenic park near a mid-sized American city. But under those hiking trails, inside the rock, there is a place that was never built for picnics. It was built for the day everything else fails. Hidden deep in the mountain is the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, the old home of NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. If you could go inside, it would feel less like a cave and more like a small city made of steel. There are office buildings, corridors, and rooms that all sit on enormous steel springs anchored into the rock. The idea is strange but simple. If a nuclear blast goes off outside, the mountain will shake. The springs let the buildings move and bounce instead of crack. Above the tunnels, there are blast doors that weigh many tons, shaped to seal tight and hold back shock waves and pressure. Everything inside was designed for a worst-case day. The air systems are made to filter out fallout and chemical dust. Water tanks sit ready. Food can be stored for a long time. There are generators to keep power on even if the grid on the surface is gone. It is not a movie set, even though movies love to copy it. The complex exists because during the Cold War, real people sat here watching radar screens and listening for alarms, on alert for the moment when missiles might rise over the horizon. If the outside world ever reached that final line, the plan was simple. The doors would close, the mountain would become a brain in the dark, still watching while the cities above took the hit. For a while, the public could see a tiny piece of this. NORAD used to offer limited tours. You would drive up, past security, and get a carefully guided walk through a controlled slice of the complex. Even that small peek was enough to make visitors feel uneasy. They saw the blast doors, the thick walls, the endless wiring, and realized every bit of it was there. because somebody believed we might really need a safe hole in the ground one day. After the attacks of September 11, the tours stopped. The doors closed not just to the outside world, but to its curiosity. Today, the closest most of us can get is a drone shot of the entrance road or a movie scene loosely based on reality. The real machine inside the mountain stays off camera. If this is the backup brain for the world, number 3 is the secret basement where the United States government plans to hide when things really go wrong. Number 3. Raven Rock, Pennsylvania. Raven Rock is a low green ridge on the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland. From a distance, it looks harmless. What you do not see from the highway is that this hill has a hollow heart. Inside the rock is an underground complex big enough to keep thousands of people working if Washington ever disappears from the map. The official name is Site R. In simple terms, it is a backup Pentagon dug into a mountain. Behind blast doors and rock, there are tunnels, offices, dorms, dining halls, generators, water tanks, all the boring but necessary pieces of a small, hidden city. If the capital is hit in a war or a disaster, this is one of the places where the government can retreat and keep running the country. It is not a rumor, it is policy. Raven Rock exists so that somewhere under a hill that looks like nothing, the phones keep ringing while the world above tries to figure out what is left. The way the law treats this place gives you a sense of how sensitive it is. In 2007, Site R was folded into something called the Pentagon Reservation. That sounds like a dry piece of paperwork until you read the fine print. The rules do not just cover walking onto the land, they also talk about drawing, photographing, or sketching the facility in certain ways without permission. Even trying to map what is where can push against restrictions. Many military bases guard their fences. This one also guards the idea of being seen at all. It is a place the government would prefer you talk about in general, not in detail. On the ground, the message is even simpler. There is a small road that turns off from the public highway and curves toward the mountain. Then you see the fence, cameras, a gatehouse, armed guards. There is no visitor center, no public tour days, no gift shop that sells t-shirts with the logo. If you are close enough to read the warning signs, you are already closer than you should be. For almost everyone watching this video, Raven Rock will never be more than a dot on a map and a rumor in a documentary. You are not meant to know what it smells like inside, or how the air sounds when the blast doors close. Raven Rock is just one head of the Hydra. Number 2 is the older, moodier cousin closer to Washington, the place that some people quietly call the other White House. Number 2, Mount Weather, Virginia. Mount Weather sits in the Blue Ridge of Virginia among thick forest, misty mornings, and autumn leaves that turn the whole hillside red and gold. But on one of those ridges, there is a compound that is not built for tourists. It is built for the worst day the country can imagine. The name is Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center. Long name, simple idea. If something terrible hits Washington, this is one of the places where the government plans to keep running the show. Deep inside the fenced area are bunkers, offices, dorm rooms, and support systems for the people who are on certain very specific lists. Officials, senior staff, people somebody has decided are too important to lose on day one. Somewhere in a file there is a plan that says who gets a seat on the bus when sirens go off. Most of the people watching this video will never see their name on anything like that. That is where the chill really starts, not with the concrete, but with the question of who counts and who does not. The mountain has already had one brutal reminder of how fast things can go wrong. In 1974, TWA Flight 514 was coming in toward Washington in bad weather. The plane never made it. It struck the slope near Mount Weather and broke apart, killing all 92 people on board. On the ground nearby was a place designed to manage national emergencies. Up in the air was an emergency no one could fix in time. The geography around Mount Weather carries that double meaning now. Safe place on paper. Hard reminder in real life that no plan is perfect and no hill is truly untouchable. Today the facility lives in a strange half-light. It is not a secret in the sense of fiction. The government admits it exists. Analysts talk about it. You can see roads and buildings on satellite pictures if you look. Yet everything important about it is kept just out of reach. There are no public tours, no visitor center, no friendly ranger to stamp a brochure. For regular people, Mount Weather only exists in leaked documents, redacted reports, and the occasional line in a news story that quickly moves on. For the people who carry the right badge, it is something else, entirely. It is a ticket for a bad day, a one-way ride into the mountain if the outside world starts to fall apart. And there are only so many seats. We have just seen where the powerful might hide. Number 1 is where the rumors say they hide everything else, from test aircraft to visitors who came from a lot farther away than Canada. Number 1. Area 51. Area 51 sits out in the Nevada desert off long straight roads where the landscape looks empty and the sky feels too big. Online it has turned into a joke. People share memes about storming the gate, running with their arms behind their backs, breaking in to rescue aliens and grab secret tech. It is easy to laugh at the idea from behind to scream. It is a lot harder to laugh when you remember that behind the memes there is a real military base, with real armed guards, real restricted airspace and warning signs that talk about the use of force. This is a place where Air Force pilots are careful not to stray into the wrong sky. Regular people are not even supposed to be close enough to see the fence. For decades, Area 51 has been a test ground for machines that only appear in history books years later. The U-2 spy plane trained here. The SR-71 Blackbird did too. Later came stealth projects and the kind of unmanned aircraft that people now take for granted in the news. New shapes flew at night over Groom Lake while radar crews tried to see them and engineers tried to make them vanish from the screen. From far away, all that mystery turns into talk about flying saucers. The uncomfortable truth is more mundane and more chilling at the same time. Every cutting-edge aircraft program has accidents. Prototypes crash. Systems fail. People die during tests that no one outside the security circle is allowed to talk about. Somewhere there are files that describe those nights in detail. For most of us, those stories will never be more than a rumor with the word classified stamped over the top. Even getting near the outer edge of Area 51 feels different from visiting a normal base. The road to the Groom Lake area runs through bare desert with nothing around it. Then the cameras appear on poles. Sensors sit in the sand. White pickup trucks watch from distant hills. The famous warning signs tell you that you are approaching a restricted zone and that photography is not welcome. There are no tours, no visitor parking, no casual selfies at the front gate. For years, the government would not even say the words Area 51 in public. Only recently did officials admit that the site exists at all, and even then they left out what people most want to know, which is what actually happens past the line where your camera has to go away. That gap between what you can see and what you are allowed to know is what keeps this place sitting at the top of every creepy list. Sometimes the scariest place is not the one full of ghosts. It is the one that keeps a straight face and tells you there is nothing to see while the real story stays, locked up behind the fence. From nuclear craters in the desert to toxic ghost towns on the side of a mountain, from secret bunkers inside quiet hills to islands that pretend they are not even there, the United States has far more do not enter signs than most of us ever realize. On the map, they are just tiny names in small print. In real life, they are places where bad decisions, dangerous experiments, and quiet cover-ups have been poured straight into the ground. The creepy part is how normal the rest of the country looks when you drive past and never know. So here is the question for you. If you could safely visit just one of these places for 24 hours, which one would you pick? And which one would you refuse to go near even for $1 million in cash? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me which forgotten corner of America we should investigate next. And if you made it all the way to number 1, you already know this is not your last trip with this channel.